All right. Good morning, everybody. Lance Tarchioni here with you on Ask the Agronomist Live this morning. Appreciate those of you who actually took a little bit of time away from harvest to join us this morning. I would anticipate this episode will be watched more in video after the fact than it will be live. We're pretty busy in the midst of harvest with a lot of soybeans getting cut and a lot of corn left to go in some areas. So plenty of harvest activity going on. We're going to take a little departure from the norm here this morning on Ask the Agronomist. Typically, I pride myself on not talking about products and staying strictly with agronomy, but I wasn't really ready to talk about fall fertilizer yet or tillage or anything else that might be a timely topic. And since we're going into that time of year when you're always looking back at performance of products and trying to figure out why things worked and why things didn't work and putting your seed order together for next year, I am going to talk about nothing but products today. And you can see my list of notes behind me on the wall. If you're one of my dealers who gets frustrated that we've got too many products, you can see there's a lot of stuff written on the board up there. We're going to talk about in brief each one of those products. So if you are a dealer who sells our products, thank you, and hopefully you get some benefit out of this. If you're a grower who plants our products, thank you, and hopefully you appreciate this information. If you don't fall into either of those two categories, you may not get anything at all out of this episode. So just a little disclaimer there. I also had a brief conversation with producer Adam, who's also a field sales representative before we started this here, and I told him that I understand that the agronomist is not supposed to talk about products that the salesman doesn't have. So I'm breaking several rules here this morning because I'm going to do some of that, but I will let Adam chime in and let me know when I talk about something that you can't have. And that's not Adam's fault that I do that. That's my fault. So you blame Lance for that, not Chris Carlisle, not your FSR. It's Lance, the agronomist, that's breaking the golden rule of talking about products that we don't have. So there's a couple funny stories that go along with some of those products, and I'll share that as we go, just to give you a little insight into how challenging it is for us to predict a year or more in advance what you're going to want to buy. We're also going to talk about some factors that are influencing performance of certain products. So as I look big picture across my trade area, I have areas that were extremely dry early in the growing season, dry to the point where we were worried about rootless corn, dry to the point where people didn't think they'd get through pollination, dry to the point 2022 was starting to remind them of another year that ended in a 2012. I have other areas that were really almost excessively wet early in the spring, especially in the month of May. Everybody got fairly dry in June, but some people had a wet May followed by a dry June. Other people had a dry May followed by an even drier June. And then when you get into the latter half of this growing season during grain fill, we also had very, very, very different weather patterns. So we had areas that were extremely dry through grain fill, a lot of stress, a lot of stock cannibalization, a lot of challenge going on. And then we had other areas where it just never really quit raining. So you've got areas that were wet early, dry late. That's probably a worst case scenario. You've got areas that were wet early and wet late. That's probably okay in most cases. And then you've got areas that were dry early and wet late. And that turned out to be a pretty good growing season as well. I'm talking primarily about corn here. Soybeans and corn act very differently as far as rainfall or weather patterns go. So it's not uncommon for one crop to be better than the other, relatively speaking. And every time I say this to someone in a group, somebody challenges me on this because their experience has been different. And that's normal with the amount of variability that we see across central Illinois. But I still continue to believe, and it's certainly this way on my farm, and sometimes I'm skewed by what happens on my farm, same way you're skewed by what happens on your farm. I still continue to believe that, relatively speaking, big picture, 2022 is a better corn year than bean year. Now, that being said, there are areas where corn is moderately disappointing. And for this year, moderately disappointing is good ground that's making 220, 230. And there's areas where soybeans are making 90. There's also areas where corn is 240, 250, pretty regular, and soybean yields will dip into the 50s, and mid 60s is about as good as they get. So you might identify with one or the other of those two scenarios, but I would say, numerically speaking, more people I talk to, more people I work with are pleasantly surprised that their corn is as good as it is. In some cases, it's the best they've ever raised. In a few small pockets, we've got growers raising the best beans they've ever raised. But I would say, as a whole, I've got more people a little bit disappointed in their bean yields relative to what they've been achieving the last couple of years, and more pleased, relatively speaking, with their corn yields. So the two crops are reacting differently to the weather patterns that we've had, and that's typical, because the critical time for corn is early, and then during grain fill, early to get off to a good start, moisture through grain fill. The critical time for soybeans is really that late July, August, and into early September. And then planting date is also a big deal with soybeans. We're seeing some in areas where we had some mid-May planted corn and we had plenty of rain through grain fill. That mid-May corn's been as good or better than the April corn. Generally speaking, the May beans are not beating the April beans. There's exceptions to that rule, but the planting date comparisons that I've looked at show a pretty strong trend towards early planting. In some areas where it was extremely dry during pod fill, there's also an advantage to early maturity soybeans. So in some cases, it was pretty tough to beat an early bean planted early. In other cases, that's not the case, but we have that every year. So let's go ahead and dive into some products. So I listed things in maturity order. So we start up here to 105. We end down here with my old 120-day friend, 7027. So this list and a half here would be corn. This list would be soybeans here. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to briefly introduce these products. Legal disclaimer here. I'm going to tell our legal department that my viewers have given me permission to not say DKC Rib Brand Blend when I say every corn hybrid, because you will appreciate it if I don't do that. And I'm just going to talk in Agronomist farmer slang here, and I'm going to call it 5626. I'm going to call it 6737. I'm going to forget the whole DKC stuff that we're supposed to say when we're on a recorded video. But anyway, so the two new early hybrids here, 105 and 106. The 106 was a cringer for Adam, because that thing has won way too many plots. We've got pitiful little supply of it to sell for 23. We knew it was good going into this year. We just didn't know how good. And we really don't sell any 106-day corn to speak of. But what happens is, and it's kind of magical, when you have something that's awesome, even if it's at a maturity that people don't like, all of a sudden they want that maturity. That happened with 7027. Before 7027 came out, how many of you that have liked 7027 over the years were ever planting 120-day corn? Almost nobody. We have a amazing 120-day hybrid come out in the marketplace several years ago, and all of a sudden there's demand for 120-day corn. Well, now we got an amazing 106-day hybrid, and voila, there's demand for 106-day corn that really hasn't existed before within our lineup. So the 105 and the 106 are very different. There's 3 different trait flavors available between those two products. So the 105 comes as a Smart Stacks Pro and as a Double Pro. The 106 comes as a Tricepta. And then if you jump up to the 107 there, it has a Smart Stacks and a Smart Stacks Pro version. So with those 3 hybrids there at 105, 106, 107, we've got really every flavor that we're offering from a trait package standpoint. So the 105, extremely healthy hybrid. Really the only thing that was beating the 105 is the 106. So both that 105 and 106 are bringing us some new yield levels at that early season corn. We will be probably more aggressively crop planting those two hybrids for sales in 2024. But for 2023, we've got introductory quantities only of those two hybrids. And the chances of our sales team being able to get significantly more of either one of those is about nil, because they have been exceptional performers all across the country. And the people that the 105 RM is their bread and butter, they get first dibs on that supply, just like we would get first dibs on a 115 if we were short on something. So we will not have, really more than trial quantities of those two early hybrids, but we are very excited about those. The 106 is a Tricepta, as I mentioned. Moving up to the 107. So that is a hybrid that we have a little better availability of, that we should be using more than we are. That thing moves south well. It has very good yield. It handles stress well. It's got good roots, excellent emergence. It's a nice plant first, harvest first hybrid. The one limitation it has is it's available as rootworm versions only, a Pro and a regular Smart Stacks. So if you're looking for double Pro, the 107 5771 doesn't really fit the bill for that. But as I'm talking here, I'm just reminded of a new hybrid that I forgot to put on my list, which is called 5745, which we also don't have a lot of supply of, primarily because we weren't real sure what we were going to do with that hybrid. And we get feedback from dealers all the time. We got too many products. We get feedback from growers that, I don't want to plant 12 hybrids on my farm. I honestly, I should have taken a little time to put a check mark beside every one of those products that has won a plot somewhere this year. Most of them would have a check mark beside them. So I tell my dealers and sellers all the time that we've got, and this is no joke, 12 or 15 different hybrids that I would say have a reasonable chance of winning any given plot situation. So a lot of people watching might remember, what we would call some people would call the good old days of DeKalb, when we were selling 61, 69, and 63, 42. Those two hybrids were head and shoulders better than anything else that was on the market at that time in our bag or anybody else's bag. And so we sold primarily two hybrids in corn, probably represented 2/3 of our sales. And then the other third was made up by a hodgepodge of different things. When you look at that list that's that long, it's hard to have one or two hybrids that really stand out against the crowd. There's just a lot of good stuff there. The breeding program has been extremely prolific, and a little bit of insight into our business. We supply germplasm to a lot of people. We're feeding the 3 Bear brands out of the same breeding program. And then we obviously license genetics to a lot of the companies through our Corn States business. And when you're DeKalb, you feel a lot of pressure to have the best. And so every time something awesome comes out, you have to weigh the options of, am I going to bring another product into the DeKalb brand, even though, do I need another product? Probably not. But if there's something awesome that's available, do I want to pass on it and let somebody else have it? So that's the pressure that DeKalb feels, to try to have the best stuff our breeding program has to offer, and manage a portfolio with a lot of SKUs in it. And that's not something that our customer really cares about. But the one thing that the customer would maybe appreciate is, the more SKUs we have, the harder it is to manage supply. And the harder it is to manage supply, the more often we are perceived as an unreliable supplier, because you want something we don't have. And so we know, as we get more and more products, it gets harder and harder to manage the inventory of each one of those products. Producer Adam's sitting here like he wants to say something. So
I was just going to mention, in the breeding process, and I think it's important to say that we are 100% exclusive with our genetics. We do license
Yes.
to other companies, other brands, and we do have other brands within our own Bayer portfolio. But the DeKalb
Right.
products are 100%
Yeah.
exclusive.
Same thing with Asgrow. So we keep our two flagship brands, DeKalb and Asgrow, are 100% proprietary against any other Bayer brand or any licensee brand. So good call out, Adam. So let's move on up to, real quick on 5745, which I mentioned but didn't really talk about. That's a hybrid that if you're looking for something with yield similar to 5982 with better plant health and is a tick drier in most cases, that's where 5745 would slide in there. We didn't get super excited about it as a new product because we sell so much 5982. It wasn't out yielding 5982, but it does have better plant health than 5982. So maybe if you're not an aggressive user of fungicide, maybe 5745 would fit your needs, maybe better than 5982 in some cases. 5981 and 82, that is the number one volume product family in the DeKalb brand. 5982 is our single largest selling volume product and works across a lot of acres across the Corn Belt. In central Illinois this year, 5982 got stronger as you went south, gets stronger where we have less crown rot and less anthracnose. And as you went north this year, you got into more crown rot, more anthracnose, and that's a product that definitely appreciates a good fungicide program and good management, but works across a lot of acres, handles stress well, has a big top end for a relatively early hybrid, good emergence, will work on a lot of different situations, and really strong hybrid in the lineup. 6080 is one that's got a little bit of an interesting story, and a lot of you probably aren't familiar with 6080. Maybe you've never sold 6080. If you're an FSR, you're going, what in the hell are you talking about? I don't have any 6080. So 6080 has a good backstory to it. 2 years ago, so this would have been in 2020, the agronomists were out walking plots, doing a pre-harvest plot tour where we go around a lot of different locations, and that would have been the first year that 6080 was in commercial trials. It would have been released the winter before. 2020 was the first growing season that we had a chance to look at it in large strip trials. And I vividly remember that when we went from location to location, it was one of the hybrids that looked good everywhere we went. And we were pretty excited about it prior to harvest of 2020. We had it picked to win some plots. As it turns out, I don't think it won a single plot that year. It was consistently average. It was consistent everywhere it was, but it was consistently mediocre. Really healthy, had a nice look to it. Yield was good, not great. Got 5982 on one side of it, had 6141 on the other side of it, both very high yielding, high flying, lots of offensive horsepower. And then you got this hybrid sandwich right in between them that, it was healthier. Yeah, it looked nice, but it didn't yield as well. You guys get paid for yield. We're a performance brand. So we went with performance. And also, once again, we get feedback. We got too many products. So we don't really need to throw something in there that's just doesn't really have any advantages. So then 2021 comes along. So 6080 was still out in some plots. A few people planted it in 2021. And with the disease pressure that we had in 21, it had an excellent performance year, probably one of the better products we had out in 2021. And so people thought, well, maybe we missed something there. And I was of the thinking that 21 was kind of an anomaly year, which it was. There were a lot of good hybrids that didn't do well in 21. There were a lot of mediocre hybrids that were great in 2021. And I would say 6080 was a good example of that in our portfolio. 2022 comes along and it's really good again. So we're also getting some feedback from some people that, hey, I want something healthy. Maybe I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of yield for something that's healthy. Maybe I got some acres I can't get fungicide on. I need something that'll work in those acres that's a little bit early. So I don't know that we're going to relaunch a hybrid that's 3 years old and make it a big deal, but we probably missed something in that hybrid. And that's a hybrid that I'm making a pitch that we ought to be incorporating into our mix. Probably doesn't fit everybody, but there is certainly a segment of growers out there who are important, and some environments out there that hybrid works quite well in. So that's one that we may, incorporate a little more into the lineup going forward.
I would say another reason we didn't see 60-80 rise as much in supply would be because I had in my own particular territory and other territories too, 60-88 that if sprayed with a fungicide and managed properly and put in the right place was doing very, very, very well.
Yep, so, that's a good call out. I kind of forgot about that. But yeah, we had another 110-day double, which food grade hybrid. So it was pretty popular in the food grade markets. And so, yeah, that was yet another reason why we kind of chose for marketing reasons to not complicate the lineup by bringing out another 110-day hybrid that we didn't really perceive that we had to have at that time. So just a little backstory for you. So 111, 33, and 35 are a new 111 this year that actually is going to work nice to use as a complement, or in some case, maybe a replacement for 5982 or 5981 if you're using the Smart Stacks Pro version. So 33 would be a Pro, 35 would be a Smart Stacks Pro, 35 would be a Double Pro. And those hybrids will give you better roots, equally good emergence, better stalks, better plant health, and vastly better grain quality with a little more yield compared to 5982. So maybe it doesn't make sense to you to replace a 109 with a 111, because when you're on either side of 110, those are kind of different worlds. But we get a lot of feedback from people that when 5982 is doing its best and yielding a ton and healthy, it acts like 111-day corn. So there's probably not going to be a lot of moisture difference between 111.35 and 5982 unless 5982 died early, in which case 111.35 is going to be better corn and you're not going to be upset that it's a little wetter. So 6198 is another kind of old niche market hybrid, and I call it out because we have people that are asking about, what's better on crown rot. If you've got a wet, poorly drained, heavy, high organic matter field. So if you're farming wet, heavy, poorly drained timber soil, which a lot of timber soil is, that's different. Crown rot pathogens thrive in high organic matter soils. So if you're farming wet, poorly drained timber soil, that's a different world than wet, poorly drained, flat, black, dark, 3.5% or higher organic matter prairie soils. 6198 is arguably one of our better hybrids for heavy, high organic matter ground that needs a tile line in it about every 30 feet. We don't sell much of it. It's an old disease shield hybrid. It's a single version, just a Double Pro, but does have a nice niche fit. That's also a hybrid, a little bit of the agronomist disclaimer. If your dealer hasn't typically been selling it and your FSR hasn't typically been selling it, they probably won't be able to get any. So once again, one of those hybrids I'm not supposed to be talking about. 6253, arguably my favorite tough dirt corn. So if you're, I got a thumbs up sign from producer Adam here. So that's it. We've been here for half an hour. That's the first thing I've said he agrees with. So that's that's a win for me. So anyway, 6253, amazing drought and stress tolerance. It's one of the few hybrids we rate a 1 for drought tolerance, and that's no lie. Phenomenal ability to handle light soil. That's really the only place you should plant it. It has some challenges on good ground that go away when you put it on your timber soil. So if you've got a lot of light ground, you absolutely should be planting 6253. It's available in a couple other versions. There's a waxy version. There's an old Smart Stacks version we don't need to talk about. The acres that it needs to go on should be planted to a Double Pro, and 6253 is the version you'd want to plant. I use a lot of 6253 on my rolling hills in northern Fulton, southern Knox County. Works great. So relatively new product, 6269, 6270. This one's been fun / challenging to talk about through harvest because it's one of those products that is varying in its performance based on the environment. We're seeing a trend emerging. If you were dry early and wet late, it's been consistently awesome. If you were wet early and late, it's generally been very good. If you were wet early and dry late, it has struggled. So it's varying its performance a little bit with the environment. It has won a lot of plots. It's not done so well in some others. And it has a lot of things that we like. Has some great foliar plant health. Has great grain quality. Generally has good roots, good stalks. Overall, good agronomics. But when it's stressed during grain fill and it's trying to make 300 bushel corn, it's going to cannibalize that good stalk, and that good stalk, once it's cannibalized, ain't all that special. So we do need to have some management with this hybrid, but it has done very, very well for some people. Some people are very excited about it. Other people a little more lukewarm on it, and it kind of goes back to what kind of weather pattern you had. 6289, I would argue. Cal just sent out a plot the other day. It yielded, what was that, 340 something, something stupid, crazy. Yeah. That thing, Jeremy Lake, who was our product manager a few years ago, if you would have pressed Jeremy at the time he was in his role, he probably would have said 6289 was our highest yielding hybrid, genetic potential wise. And I don't disagree with that. Now it needs some management. It was not bulletproof getting through 2021. It certainly has been amazing in 2022. But if you're not a high management grower that likes using fungicide, I would not plant it. And it is going to do very, very, very well generally in high yield environments. If we get into stress, either drought or disease, it's going to get a little less consistent. And that's when you're going to want to have that good management to go with it. It's also a single traded reversion product. It's a Tricepta. That's the only way we offer it. So if you like to plant rootworm corn, you can put 6289 out of your head. And it's also a hybrid that not everyone has been selling. And with the performance we've seen this year, I would guess it might be difficult for us to get more. So people that are jumping on that bandwagon late, I don't know if there's any more room on the bandwagon or not for them to get on. So that's one that I would, maybe be, a little bit concerned with from a supply standpoint in some areas. But certainly very, very exciting performance. 6357, another one of my personal favorites, the one I lovingly call coon corn. I haven't done this experiment yet, but sometime before we quit selling 6357, I'm going to plant it I'm going to put like 6 rows of 6357 next to 6 rows of sweet corn and see which one the coons eat first and eat more. We've actually pulled 6357 from a lot of plots because in a plot situation where you give raccoons a choice of 20 different things on the smorgasbord, 57 is the first one they go to. Now, before you freak out and go, well, hell, I got coon damage in my fields, I'll be damned, I'm going to plant that thing. In a field situation, I don't see it being much different than anything else. If you've got a field of one hybrid and there's coons there, which there's coons everywhere. I can remember, I digress here, but I'll tell a quick story. I can remember when I was a kid, my brother and I, we used to do a lot of coon hunting and trapping. And when I was a kid, like junior high, high school, you could take an unskinned, uncleaned, unbrushed, covered with blood and mud coon whole carcass in and get $30 for it if it was a good, big, nice pelt. Didn't even have to skin it. These days, they won't even take the crappy ones, let alone pay you anything for them, and you got to skin them to get like $3. And I never got good at skinning a coon. I've seen some people that can do it so fast and so easy that maybe it's worth doing for $3. But I don't think most people think that it's worth doing for $3. And the coon population is certainly reflective of the fact that nobody thinks it's worth their time to hunt coons anymore. So I have talked to some people that have gotten like nuisance permits to slaughter as many coons as they want throughout the growing season, and have taken 300 plus, out of some relatively small areas. So I actually think raccoons are doing far more damage to corn than deer are. The deer are getting a bad rap for what the coons are doing in some cases. The deer, by the way, are doing more damage to soybeans than they are to corn. So I primarily see deer damage in soybeans, raccoon damage in corn. So do not be afraid to plant 6357 because of raccoons. They love to pick it out of a plot. They love to ruin our data quality when we put it in plots. But from a field perspective, whatever hybrid you plant in the field, that's what the coons that are in that field are going to eat. And they're not going to eat that much more of it if it happens to be 6357. The reason I call this out is I like 6357 kind of on the same place as I like 6253. They are both good stress, good light dirt, good droughty, drained timber soil kind of hybrids. 6357 has a pretty big top end, and every now and then it'll yield 300 bushel in a high yield environment. And people will think that, well, that's what I want to plant on my best soil. It is not the best choice for your best ground, but it is one of the best choices for your tougher acres. And it's a very good sand hybrid. So if you're looking for something that can work on sandy soils, whether they're irrigated or not, I really like 6357 on sandy soils. It's got great leaf architecture for that. It's got good height for that. It's got the stress tolerance. It's got the plant health. It's got the grain quality. It's got a lot of things that I kind of like to see in a hybrid that's going to get put on sandy ground under water. So moving on, so 6390, I'm going to talk about it along with 6464. So if there were two hybrids that represented the challenges that 21 had more than 6390 and 6464, I'm not sure what they would be. The trifecta of crown rot, southern rust, and tar spot hit those two genetic families about as hard as anything we've got. And poor 6464 was a brand new hybrid in 2021. If you could not pick a worse year to be a brand new corn hybrid than 2021. And so it made such a unimpressive impression on some folks. It was pretty well dead in the water at the end of 2021. 6390 wasn't really significantly different from a performance standpoint, but it had been in the marketplace for a couple years. And so people had seen it and seen how good it could be. And they saw the version of it that we saw when we launched it. The people that saw 6464 for the first time in 2021 are wondering, what in the hell are these DeKalb people thinking? Bringing this thing out, just didn't make sense to them at all. Well, in 2022, if you were looking at 6464, you got to see what we saw in 19 and 20, which is the reason we brought it out as a new hybrid in 2021. So those two genetic families have probably had the biggest rebound from 21 to 22 of anything in the lineup. They have both been outstanding this year. Very, very high yielding hybrids, very offensive hybrids. Hybrids are going to respond to management, and hybrids that I would plant one or the other of. I would not probably recommend a lot of people planting acres to both of them. They have similar strengths and weaknesses. I would consider 6464 to be an agronomically better product than 6390, but it has some of the same agronomic weaknesses of 6390. It does have better roots, does have, I think, slightly better plant health, but they have some of the same strengths and weaknesses, and their strengths are really, really being highlighted in 22. Their weaknesses were exposed in 2021. So both those hybrids are available as a double and as a smart stacks. New hybrid coming out there right in between them, 6421 and 22. excellent agronomics. I'll talk about it along with our old tried and true 64, 34, and 35. Um, I would argue that 6421 is a good candidate to replace 6434, and 6422 is a good candidate to replace 6435. They're the same maturity. 6434 and 35 have always had the reputation of having outstanding plant health. 6421 and 22 is actually as healthier or healthier than 64, 34, and 35. Has even better grain quality than 34 and 35, and is going to bring a little more yield with better emergence and lower green snap risk than we see with 34 and 35. So there's a lot of reasons why I think there's a good a good opportunity to start to make that switch. We are still offering both 34 and 35, but in a reduced role versus what they've had in the past. 6487, an oldie but a goodie, actually due to tar spot resistance, is the #1 volume DeKalb hybrid still in Northern Illinois, even though it's, I think, 11 years old, which is like 140 in human years. That's pretty amazing that an 11-year-old hybrid is even being sold, let alone the #1 volume hybrid for a sales team. So certain parts of the state really never made the switch to 6434 because 6487 just never faltered. And they tried 6434, and what they found was it was just more expensive and didn't perform as well. So they stayed with 6487. Other places, 6434 was spanking 6487. And so they dropped 6487 about 6 years ago and switched to 6434, and have since switched to a couple other different hybrids and never went back to 6487. But 6487 is still being sold in places where people never quit selling it. So still an important product for some folks. 6584, this has also got an interesting backstory. This was a hybrid that was new last year in plots. This is the first year we've sold it. It was a little inconsistent in plots in 21, but being a little inconsistent in 21, you had to be pretty good to be just a little inconsistent in 21, because some things were just flat bad. So being a little inconsistent in 21, that somewhat gave some people some reasons to be optimistic around 6584, and it has been absolutely phenomenal in 22. So some people that were kind of haters of that product last year are maybe coming around. Some are still going to be a hater. Shout out to my buddy Chris Carlisle; he would be one of those. So we've got some people that are pretty excited about 6584. We actually used some 6584 as a sub this year because it was a little inconsistent in 21, even though it was a new hybrid. We weren't sold out of it in 22. So when we started running out of things like 6617, 6595, 6618, a lot of other products, the full season side of things, we subbed in some 6584. And people get frustrated with us when we can't deliver what they wanted, and when we sub them into something that they could have ordered. That that's the thing about getting subbed to something. You could have ordered what we just subbed you to because it was available. That's why we use it as a sub. That's not what you wanted. You would order it in the first place if that's what you wanted. So you get frustrated with us. Well, this year, if you got subbed to 6584, you got about a 15 bushel gift because it's probably outperforming what you tried to order that we didn't have. So that sometimes you get a little bit lucky with what you use as a sub. So 6584 also has a SmartStax Pro version. That's what 11533 is. And it and 5771 share the unique distinction of having two rootworm versions of the same germplasm. And that's not something we make a habit of. And long term, I think we're probably going to move towards the Pro version of both of those, which might be a bit of a problem for us because we don't have the rootworm pressure to really need Pro. So you might be looking forward to using 6584 rather than 11533. We're probably going to move in the direction of selling only 11533 and probably won't long-term sell two different rootworm versions of the same hybrid. So 6595 is at the top of the list there, which is where it deserves to be. So that is our number one volume selling hybrid in West Central Illinois. Has been what, Adam, maybe 3 years in a row.
Probably.
Tip.
It's a close second behind 59, 81, 82 as far as nationwide.
Yes, it is.
It actually was number one nationwide until this year, I believe.
Up there pretty high on that list. Also available in several different flavors. We sell primarily the Double Pro version of it because that is the best version of it. It is arguably probably our easiest to position corn hybrid. If you are a dealer talking to a grower and you don't know how that grower is going to manage the corn that you sell him, you don't know where he's going to plant it, you don't know if it's going to get fungicide, you don't know if the field's going to make 280 or 180 or 115, you don't know if he's going to harvest it at 25% or 15%, you don't know anything about what he's going to do with it, probably the safest product to sell is 6595 because it's very broadly adapted, works on almost any soil type. It falls into that category of, I joke about this. People ask me, which one of your hybrids need fungicide? I used to say, well, none of them need it, but they all like it. The 21 exposed a few that they don't dislike it, they need it. But 6595 is a hybrid that, generally does pretty well, regardless of how you manage it. It's probably not having its strongest year in 22, but it's been very solid, very good, beloved by lots of people. It will still be our number one volume hybrid in 23. It might still be our number one volume hybrid in 24. It's not going away anytime soon. We got lots of other stuff we could sell, but I get people that I work with that probably plant 30 or 40% of their acres to 6595. Now, when I've got this many products to choose from, I struggle with recommending more than 20% of my acres in any given product because we got too many other good things to work into the order. So, if you're planting more than 25% of your acres to any single product on that list, I'd like to see you diversify a little bit and not get too many eggs in one basket. But if you're going to have too many eggs in a basket, the 6595 basket is a good basket to put them in. 6604 and 06 are kind of the darling of the new hybrids and plots this year. Very, very, very high yielding 116. Actually, probably going to give 6618 a run for its money for the highest yielding 116 DeKalb hybrid. Available as a Smart Stacks and a Tricepta. So that's a little bit unique to have a Smart Stacks Tricepta pairing, but that's what 6604 and 6606 is. Not quite as healthy as the new 114, but reasonably good plant health, a lot of yield, has performed very well across. And I don't know that I've seen a plot where it didn't do well in. So it's been consistently very good in 2022. That's one that we're regretting that we didn't get a little more aggressive on in our crop plan. So we've probably already promised every bag we've got of 6604 and 06 to somebody. But certainly one that we want to spread it around as much as we can. A lot of people get a look at it in 2023. Our only question is, how much do we ramp it up in 24? And this is something that you don't have to worry about, but we will certainly worry about with the pile of 6595 we're selling. How much 6606 can we move without reducing the amount of 6595 we're selling? And are you ready for us to reduce the amount of 6595 that we're selling? Last few years, you would have said no. Maybe you're starting to think yes. That's what we have to figure out looking forward to 24. And believe it or not, we are getting pretty close to the time when we start to talk about 24, because when we get new products that get released in December, then we have to submit a final version of our crop plan, that's what we're asking our production group to grow for us to sell to you in 24. We do that in February. So we're starting to, while we're selling you seed that you're going to plant in 23, we are in the background working on what we're going to ask for to have to sell to you for 24. So that brings us to probably my favorite hybrid of the year, which would be 6618. So I've always been a fan of 6618. So for me to like 6618, that is nothing new. Chris Callowell and I have pointed out every year that 6618 and 6595 have been compared to each other. 6618 has been better than 6595. Big picture. That doesn't mean it's better in every given situation. So I talked about how versatile 6595 is. 6618 is not quite that versatile. 6618 needs to be, I think, higher managed. It needs to be on better ground. When it's positioned and managed correctly, it's healthier than 6595. But if it ends up in the wrong situation, doesn't get managed right, that's not necessarily the case. But very, very good plant health, very big yields, comes as a smart stacks and as a double. I prefer it as a double, but we've had people that have had really good luck with the smart stacks version as well, and continues to just really, really, I have a lot of people that plant that hybrid that tell me, year in and year out, that was my best corn. And so far, what I've been in my harvest at home, it's been my best hybrid as well this year. So 6737 has a bit of an interesting story to it as well. It had been up till this year the highest yielding smart stacks hybrid that we had tested, and was enjoying some really, really good success and good popularity. We knew going into this year that we were going to be supply constrained on it. We had a production issue with the purity of some seed stock that was going to limit our ability to produce it to sell in 23. So we knew we had some bad news for 6737 fans going into this year. Mother Nature has probably helped us ease that sting a little bit by handing 6737 probably the first average performance year that product has had. So it's not, standing at the top as it had been the previous 2 years. So when somebody comes to you and says, hey, I can only get you 2/3 as much 6737 as you had last year, maybe that won't be as irritating to you as we were afraid it might have been. Still extremely healthy, still really good out of the ground, still great grain quality, great stalks, great roots, about 2 foot taller than corn needs to be. It is one of DeKalb's tallest hybrids. If you want to set up a short corn demo that makes short corn look really short, compare it to 6737. But that hybrid, looking ahead to 24 with a lot of other new stuff coming out, I don't know whether we ramped that thing back up to where we thought it was headed, or we just, kind of let it set where it's at and go stronger with new products like 6604. 6794 is another hybrid that probably arguably could go with 6289 and 6618 and fight it out for the three of them being the best DeKalb hybrid in Central Illinois in 22. Very high yielding Tricepta hybrid. Does have a couple agronomic weaknesses that need to be managed. It is one of our slower emerging hybrids. And it also has probably, after 6435 and 6208, is probably our most susceptible hybrid to green snap as well. So if you've seen some good things out of 6794, as most people have, before you get crazy and plant a third of your farm to it next year, just be aware that there are a couple things that can happen to make that hybrid look a little less sexy than it has this year. But it has been amazingly good corn in 22 for a lot of people. Getting really full season here, so I'm going to call out this new hybrid really quick. We've got virtually no supply, and we're never going to get a bag of it because it has been the best DeKalb hybrid in the country this year. And the teams that crop planted it are going to sell every bag they can get, and they're not going to share with a team that didn't crop plant it. So we don't currently sell any 118-day corn to speak of. So the fact that we didn't crop plant it isn't because we're stupid. It's because we didn't need it. And it's another example of you weren't asking for 118-day corn. If I showed you data on that 118-day corn, all of a sudden you'd be a fan of 118-day corn. And we'll probably have some people that are going to want it, and we'll probably grow some to offer in 24. Have very little offer in 23. Is a brand new hybrid. Does come smart stacks and double, which works good for us. So just calling it out. 6848 is a hybrid that we have been using a little bit as a sub for 6737. Prior to this year, it had been equal in performance to 37, even though 37 was the one that had the fame and fortune. 6848 was a comparable hybrid. This year, I would say 6848's probably been better than 6737. So if your plan was to use 48 as a sub for 37, your sub option, is having better performance than maybe what you were planning to plan. And we'll finish up here with our beloved 120-day corn, which I believe, I haven't heard his results from this year. Maybe he'll beat it this year. There's been some super high yield records set this year. As far as I know, Dr. Belo, his highest yield he's ever achieved in any plot in his program at University of Illinois was with 7027. So it is a phenomenally high yielding hybrid. I've been on calls this year with my colleagues from Southern Illinois. We had a new 120-day that we thought might replace it. Probably not going to replace it. Just too good. And people that love it are going to continue to love it. It moves north well. So if you've ever wanted to do something crazy and plan a 120-day double pro, 7027 would be the one to plant. So any parting comments before we switch to beans, Adam?
No, I think you covered it really well. There are a few other nuances like 68, 69, for example.
Yeah.
We've used those as a sub. It's done really well for replacing 7027.
Yep.
There's a couple other nuances, but
I will call out on 6737. That hybrid, and this was always a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, had been so good that we had people that were planting it on bean stubble just to get the genetics. And although it is, at the time, again, it's not going to look that way when we analyze data this year, but at the time, it was our highest performing smart stacks. But it was not outperforming 6618, 6794, and some other full season double pros that you could have been using on that bean stubble. So our message with 6737 was going to be, well, let's save it for the corn on corn acre where we truly need the trait protection, and let's quit planting it on bean stubble where we don't need it. And that's how we were going to stretch the supply of it, because it really never was better than some of those full season double pro options on bean stubble. So
the only other thing I'd add is, back to the sub conversation, that we never ever try to sub anybody out. We always try to give everybody what they originally asked for, what we talked about, what they're familiar with. But at the same time, I guess after that conversation, I hope that puts a little bit of trust into the fact that if we do have to sub you out to something else, it's not a bad product that we're subbing you out to.
Right.
We have a lot of excellent products right now. We're very blessed with our lineup, and so have faith in that we're putting something on there that is going to do well.
And to follow up on that, I would iterate too, on behalf of our sales team, they work really, really, really hard behind the scenes to shake down, scrounge, find, maybe even threaten bodily harm on some poor sap in Ohio that's sitting on 20 bags of something because you need it on your farm. So these guys make themselves miserable during the sales season. I wouldn't do it. I'd just say tough shit and, switch you to something. But the salesmen don't do that. The salesmen work their butts off to find you what you're looking for. And we do actually work really hard to try to do that, and put a lot of thought into this crop planning process to try to make sure we have what we think you're going to want. The trick to this whole process is, as I mentioned, we do it a year ahead. And sometimes you change your mind on what you want, generally based on performance. And that's when we get in a little bit of trouble. So I can already see, looking at the clock, I don't have time within the given hour to do justice to this awesome Asgrow Extend Flex lineup. So we're going long today, because I'm not gonna say we're not doing beans. So if you got to leave at 8:30, that's cool. You can come back and watch the recording later. So we'll try to go even faster through beans. I should have done what Doug Schemmer always did: start with soybeans. And people don't expect that because we have kind of a corn bias in our head. But shorter lineup of beans here. We've really focused as much as we can. We've condensed down. There's several products on here that are on their way out of the lineup that we're going to sell very little of. So if you dial into the focus products here, 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 and here. So first disclaimer, focus product in 2024, not 2023. So fun story on 27XF3. When that thing came out of breeding last year, it had an 8 to 10 bushel yield advantage over a lot of other products. Fairly common when things come out of breeding, they've got this huge yield advantage in breeder trials. If the advantage they have in the real world is half what they have in the breeder trials, that's a damn good product. You know, when that thing came out with an 8 or 10 bushel advantage, I called BS on that. I gave Mike Bachman, our soybean product manager, a lot of grief about, well, you're not going to, 10 bushel in soybeans, come on. That's like a corn hybrid's is 35 bushel better than anything else. That just doesn't happen. So I was prepared to see, 3 bushel, 4 bushel, 5 would be ecstatic, 8 to 10, that's just bad data is all that is, as far as I'm concerned. I'll be damned. It's about 10 bushel better than a lot of things this year. So it's been a freak of nature. It has won plots where it was the earliest product in a plot. It has beaten late group 3s and early group 4s. It's beaten 38XF1. It's beaten 40XF1. We've got a real small pile to sell for 23. Everybody wants more. Everybody in the country wants more. Ain't nobody getting more, because by the time it's like, have you ever been an heir to an estate that was worth like $5 million, but you're one of 40 heirs? By the time you get your cut of that $5 million, it's not that sexy. That's what divvying up 27XF3 supply is going to be like for this year. But moving forward to 24, we are going to ramp that thing up. Now, I will say, for those of you that need a true 2.7, it is not. It is acting more like an early 3 than a late 2. So if you need a true 2.7, the new 2.8 might be something to look at, although we've got very little supply of that for 23. We still offer 27XF1, which is what we've been selling at that maturity, which is a 2.7. And there's a new 2.6 as well. So we've got products at that 2.7 maturity. If you just need an early bean, 27XF3 by Central Illinois standards is still an early bean, but it's not a true 2.7. I'll touch on 2.9 here quickly. 2.9 is kind of a mess for us, just to be quite frank about it. We've got 3 different 2.9s, which is not our intent. Because everybody somewhere likes one of the 3, but there is no consensus about which one of the 3 that they like. And my guess is, it's possible that we might even have a 2.9XF4 in the works, because I know Mike Bachman, and I know what Mike Bachman wants to do is he wants to solidify around one 2.9 and dump the others. And we haven't found a 2.9 yet that everybody can broadly agree on. That's the one I want. So that's why we've got 3 of them that fit kind of 3 different market needs. And we're still looking for that blockbuster 2.9 that can kind of clean house there. So 31XF2 having the year of its life. We were in the process of replacing 31XF2 with 31XF3. We were planning to sell both of them in 23 anyway, because we couldn't get enough of the new one to completely replace the old one. And so a little bit of good luck on our part. We still grew the old one because we've had some people that had 90 bushel field yields with the old one, and they're going to want more of that. So we can still offer 31XF2 if you had them this year and loved them. We are planning to move to 31XF3. So going to be probably a tough argument within Asgrow. Do we grow 31XF2 again for sale in 24, or do we just consolidate everything behind the new XF3? the way to differentiate those two products is if you want to make 31XF2 shine, you got to plant it early on good soil and manage for, high yielding soybeans. You don't want to plant it late. You don't want to put it on light ground. It is too short. It does not perform well on light soil or late planted. 31XF3, our data would say, is as good as 31XF2 when it's great, and it's a lot better than 31XF2 when it's less than great. So 31XF3 is a more broadly adapted hybrid or variety and will work in more situations. But if you've got a lot of good ground and you'd like to plant beans early and you're trying to raise 90 bushel soybeans and doing what it takes to raise 90 bushel soybeans, that's the environment that 31XF2 likes. Nothing wrong with using them in that scenario. Mentioned 33XF2 very quickly. That was the 3.3 that we sold this year. We've never sold a ton of those beans. They came out of breeding, looked pretty strong. They have struggled to meet expectations that we placed on them. They're really not keeping up with 35XF1s. Not a bad bean, just not as exciting as the new 3.1 and the new 3.3. So 33XF2, we're going to exit from that product. And 33XF3 has been just absolutely outstanding this year. This is kind of a good story here. It was one of the strongest looking products coming out of breeding a year ago, and it was at a maturity that we really needed. We needed something to take some weight off of 35XF1. We never really found a 34X6 replacement. If you remember back in the good old Extend days, we sold primarily 3 beans, 3.4s, 3.6s, and 3.9s. Well, our old 3.6, we did a good job replacing with the new 3.5, and the old 3.9, we did a good job replacing with the new 3.8. What we really hadn't ever found a good replacement for was 34X6. And so we got pretty aggressive with 33XF3 for a new bean. Now that's with a caveat there. When you sell as many 38s and 35s as we do, we didn't get crazy aggressive with any of the new beans. If you add all the XF3s together, they represent about 15% of our mix. But the single largest pile of a new bean that we have is the 3.3. And it's been outstanding this year. So we'll have enough of those for everybody to take a look at them. They're going to take some pressure off of 35XF1s. The hard part for me is, we'll talk about this new 3.8 in a minute. How much do we pull back on 35XF1 and 38XF1 going into 24? Again, that's not something that you care about, but if we guess wrong, you'll care about it. And so that's when you got two products that are as dominant as 3.5s and 3.8s, and they've done as many good things for us and for you as those have. You don't want to move off of them too early, but it feels like with the performance of this XF3 class, it's time to start moving to some newer genetics. And I will give another shout out to our breeding program and Mike Bachman. We were told that this XF3 class was special. We had spent the XF1 and XF2 class were, basically a lot of trying to get Extend Flex products out there that were as good as our Extend products for people that, needed to switch to Flex for more, weed control flexibility. So we didn't have as much new genetics available in Extend Flex in the first and second class. We were just trying to get something that was as good as what we had. They thought the XF3 class was the first class where we're really going to move that forward. And so it really looks like that's the real deal, because these XF3 beans have really been standing out. I mean, 35XF1 and 38XF1 beat most competitive products most of the time. And 33XF3 and 38XF3 and 31XF3 and 27XF3 are beating 35XF1 and 38XF1 most of the time in our trials. So very exciting where we're headed there. 35s, I've mentioned them several times. They are number one high volume bean in Central Illinois. They are what we replaced 36X6 with, and they have continued to carry the mantle of 36X6 as our high volume bean. They are, in my opinion, best on good ground in a high yield environment. If they end up on light soil or in a low yield environment, they turn into an average bean. They're a little bit like 31XF2 in that I think they respond the best on best ground, high management, high yield. And when you start to vary from that, you're probably better off switching to 38XF1, which to me is the 65-95 of soybeans. If you were going to pick one Asgrow bean, and I didn't know how you were going to manage it, where you were going to plant it, what kind of soil, what kind of planting date, what kind of population, were you going to use fungicide or not, what kind of fertility do you have, 38XF1 is probably what I would recommend. Now, we don't sell as many 38XF1s as 35XF1s just due to maturity. There's more people that can plant a 3.5 than can plant a 3.8 that's maybe a 4.0. 38XF1 is pretty late for a 3.8. But 38XF1 has, it's funny to me, our data has said every year that 38XF1 was a bushel or two better. It varies a little bit from year to year, but our data has said 38XF1 was a bushel or two better than 35XF1 every year we've compared them. I swear, I wish I'd kept track of this, I meet about equal numbers of people that say 35s were better than 38s. The other half would say their 38s are better than 35s. They're generally happy with both of them, but generally they have a preference for one or the other. And it's again, it's about evenly split. In any given day, I'll have somebody tell me that, I don't know why you guys are so excited about 38s. My 35s were better. And then some other guy 2 hours later would say, I don't know why you guys are so excited about 35s. My 38s were better. Maybe I said that same way both times. I don't know, but you know what I was trying to mean. 37XF1 is kind of a tough dirt bean that we've kept in the lineup just for that purpose. 38XF1 will out yield 37X1 on really any acre. So 38XF1 can be a tough acre bean as well, but I don't want you planting half your farm to 38XF1. So if you need something for a little more diversity on a tougher acre, 37XF1 is another option there. 38XF3 was a bean that coming out of breeding last year had about a 2 bushel advantage over 38XF1, but it didn't quite have the standability and maybe didn't quite have the plant health of 38XF1. And so for 2 bushel more yield, maybe a little bit of a trade-off on agronomics, you got proven performance of 38XF1 versus breeding data that says a couple bushel advantage for 38XF3. We did not want to make a move to replace 38XF1 with 38XF3 until we saw another year's worth of performance out of 38XF3 and saw them in the real world beating 38XF1. And that's what we've seen this year. So it's going to be pretty easy, I think, to sell the pile of 38XF3 we've got. And then we got the tough decision to make of, how much do we pull back on 38XF1 and how much do we sub in 38XF3? And can we sell two high volume 3.8s, or do we just swap one high volume 3.8 for the other high volume 3.8? It would be, in my opinion, too aggressive to make a swap. So we're going to sell a mix. Is it a 50-50 split? Is it a 60-40 split? Is it 70-30 split? Which way do you make the split? Those are all things that we still have to hash out. But both 3.8s will definitely be in the marketplace for 24, and both 3.8s are definitely awesome. That's what I can tell you at this point. So 39XF3 is getting a little bit overlooked, in my opinion, because of the performance of these two and because of the popularity of this 4.0. And honestly, we got 4 beans here that essentially are all the same maturity. We've got them labeled at 3.8, 3.9, and 4.0, but you put those 4 beans next to each other, any given location, any given year, they might mature the way they're labeled. They might mature the opposite of the way they're labeled. They might all mature the same. They're all full season soybeans, I can tell you that. There's not a lot of difference in yield performance across the 4. And if you like to plant a whole farm, a whole operation to late 3s, well, there you go. Put 25% of your acres in each of those 4, that'd be a pretty damn good lineup. And we don't have supply of 39XF3 to do a lot with them this first year. And we may decide to not do a lot with that bean. simply because do we really need 4 late threes? Now, those 4 late threes are all 4 amazing late threes, but truly, do we need 4 late threes? So we'll hash that out. The 40XF1, I think, is probably going to get overshadowed by a few other beans this year, but this will be the first year, if they're not the highest yielding bean that we test, this will be the first year since they've been in our testing that they haven't been the highest yielding soybean from Asgrow. So 40XF1s have a ton of top end potential. They are a little more average in their standability. I tend to prefer them on lighter soil just to improve their standability. If you're going to put them on heavy black ground, planted early, high fertility, pull the population back painfully low, and that will help improve the standability. But the best way to improve standability on any soybean is to plant it on light soil. If you plant a soybean on light soil, it's fairly uncommon that they're going to lodge enough to really irritate you. So that was a very quick rundown of the bean lineup. Anything you want to add to that, Adam, since we're in overtime here?
No, I don't think so. I just keep it simple, quick. Don't forget, everybody, about Yield Chaser. We've been talking about products.
Yeah.
Just a quick shout out for Yield Chasers. Make sure you guys are talking to your reps, talking to your dealers, and getting signed up for a Yield Chaser event. We're going to have Dr. Bilo there in February.
Yep.
So it'll be an exciting event to come to. All you got to do is just sign up. So pretty easy to get involved in that exciting opportunity. We will be back on the 3rd of November, Lance.
3rd of November. Okay. Well, I'll probably still be harvesting soybeans. But we'll be back in 2 weeks, 3rd of November. And it just dawned on me after an hour and 12 minutes. I never once asked anybody to submit a question. Apologize for that. I just been up here shooting off the mouth. We didn't get any questions today, which might be an indication that, nobody cares what we're talking about. Or maybe just you might have some feedback for us to stick with agronomy and don't talk about products. We did make that divergence here just for this one episode. Hopefully you felt this was more information and less of a commercial. That was not the intent of it, but I hope you got something out of it. Thank you for watching. One thing, Adam.
One other thing, too, I want to add that is very pertinent to what we've been talking about today as far as products. Jennifer Elliott, another rep on our team, has done an excellent job of working with Lance and Chris Carlisle to produce specific product detailed videos, and she's got those all uploaded to our YouTube account.
Yep.
So if you want some more information or specifics on a given hybrid or variety of product, make sure to go to our page, the Cal Basro West Central Illinois, on YouTube, and you might be able to find it.
Yep. No, that's a great call out, Adam. Thank you. Yeah. Chris and I spent, most of those videos are pretty short, like 2 minutes, just kind of hitting the highlights of positioning and characteristics of products. All that information is in our seed guide. Chris and I go to a lot of work every year to produce the seed guide and write the written comments that are in the seed guide, and the positioning recommendations and all that stuff was written locally by Chris and I. So when sometimes I get people that tell me, well, I don't want to know, don't tell me what's in the book. Give me the real skinny on stuff. Well, Chris and I are writing the book. So, there's not much I can tell you about a product that's not in the book, unless it's something about a product that we learn after the book gets published, which happens every year. So every year, we publish the book in July, and then harvest rolls around. It's like, damn, wish I could change this or change that. And we will for next year. But unless we've learned something new about a product, if you ask Chris or I to describe a product to you, it's going to sound a lot like what the seed guide says, because we're the guys that put the seed guide together. So the seed guides are good. I get a little bit frustrated sometimes. We spend a lot of time putting that seed guide together, and people ask me questions every day that's in the seed guide that we gave you. But I love talking to you. I love answering your questions. So keep asking. But there's not much Chris and I can tell you about a product that's not in the seed guide. So if you got a seed guide sitting in your pickup truck and you don't want to waste your time calling Chris or I, or it irritates you leaving voicemails for us because we never answer our phone, my guess is the question you're going to ask me I might actually might, you might not know this, but I might, before I answer your question, I might open up my seed guide and I might refresh my memory as to what the answer to your question is, because it's in the seed guide. So anyway, with that, we'll sign off for this week. Thanks for staying with us an extra 15 minutes if you survived. And we'll be back again in 2 weeks. And everybody, please stay safe during harvest. Take care.